Well, well, well. Look who's back for another round of But the Book Was Better. Or was it? Welcome to Pages to Screen, the show that answers the age-old question, was the adaptation worth it? Strap in! It's time to dive into the thrilling world of did they really just do that? We're going to tear a masterpiece into masterpieces, dissecting adaptations to our beloved screen. Now, for today's scrutiny, this is From Page to Screen with your host, Timothy Imholt.
Hey, hello everybody. You got Tim and Doug again. This time instead of Silence of the Labs, you're doing the movie Hannibal. So if you recall in the last movie, and really it's about transition from book to movie, and with Thomas Harris stuff, it's maybe not shot for shot, but it's kind of just a direct translation from one to the other. You could just about use the book as the screenplay on these things. Um, they stayed that true to it. I mean, there was some difference, but not huge. But in this one, if you recall, Hannibal Lecter got free. So fast forward 6, 7, 8 years, Doug. Are they right? Something like
hmm
that. He's kind of retired. He's living off in Europe someplace, and he's following along and just trying to live his little life. And he found a job. I found this one cute. He found a job curating a library that was like the Capote library, which had a bunch of stuff from Dante in it, like actual Dante documents from when he was writing the Inferno. And mysteriously, they didn't really cover this in the movie too much, but in the book they did. Mysteriously, the guy that was curating the library disappeared magically.
Yeah, I don't remember that in the movie. I think he just opened up with him as Dr. Fell, I think it's the name of the character. But yeah, I don't.
In the book, they kind of covered that the last guy disappeared, and in the movie, they kind of said the same thing. It was like, remember the investigator was coming to pick up the bags from the old guy, and like, oh, did he leave a suicide note or something, or did he just disappear?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
yeah, he disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and all of a sudden, Dr. Fell shows up and he's like, "Hey, I can watch after the museum for you. I know a lot about Dante. I'm a good guy. Check me out, you know." And somehow magically he kind of wound up with the job. I wonder how many people before him would have had to disappear before he finally got the chance to do it. But hey, you know. So what do you think about Mason Verger, who, by the way, is Gary Oldman, I think? Uh,
It is, and I had to go back and look that up. I was pretty shocked. But they brought that character back in the TV series, but we're talking about the movie today. Um, Really interesting and really well played by Oldman. I'm not as familiar with the book as I think I've only read it once. It was years ago, where I've seen the movie multiple times. Um, but just, I mean, absolutely horrific character as well, who gets his justice towards the end there, right, with the hog. Um,
yeah, and
but an absolute another horrible human being, which almost gets you rooting for our anti-hero, Dr. Lecter. I mean, well written, well played by both actors.
yeah. And Krendler had it coming, man. He just absolutely, or Ray
Yeah,
Liotta,
for sure.
just flat out had it coming. And I watched it with my daughter, who's all of 11. And by the way, she was rooting for Hannibal the entire time. And for anybody who's like, how would you let an 11-year-old watch this? You have to know the 11-year-old. Okay, I would probably not let my 14-year-old watch this movie, but this particular 11-year-old, she's fine. My 14-year-old would not sleep through the night. She wanted to. She asked me for copies of the book. She's like, "Can I read it?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, if you want, but start with Silence." Okay. So she's going to start with Silence of the Lambs and work her way forward.
That's
Really,
a
I
better way to do it. Yeah.
toyed with the idea of making her start with Red Dragon, but I don't know. I think the entire thing was a little different though. So if you looked at like Silence of the Lambs and even Red Dragon, they were more suspenseful in ways instead of just sort of Hannibal on the loose, like whacking people, right? So you had to think, oh my God, what would Hannibal have done in this case, right? Because during Silence, you hear about it, you sort of see little snippets of it, but you don't really see it until you get to.
Right. For example, at the very end of Silence, right, with the doctor that's chasing him, Hannibal's actually on his tail, right? And you know that this guy's going to end up in a horrible ending, but we don't see it. We don't really know.
Yeah, right.
Whereas, what's the character's name? The French
The,
inspector.
the Italian inspector, yeah.
Yeah, the
Pazzi.
Italian inspector Pazzi. That's it. I mean, we see the whole thing on how he hangs him and disembowels him right there. I mean, it's not much to the
His,
imagination.
his
It's
last name
described
is
in the book as
Patsy, for
dumb.
God's sake. Come on, he's going to go down for something.
Right,
That's
right,
the way it
right,
is.
right.
But you had to kind of appreciate the sense of humor of Hannibal in ways because,
Mhm.
like, Paul Krenler, who was doing mean things to Clarice Starling, which I find it interesting that Hannibal is very protective of Clarice, right? He very much wants to make sure she succeeds in her career. And I think at the end he was torn. He's like, do I turn myself in and say she caught me to help her career, or do I just disappear, right? And I think he was really kind of torn about that for a minute because he wanted to help her, but he didn't want to help her that much.
Well, and they kind of pull a switch on you at the end too, right? Because you think he's cutting her arm off or her wrist off, right? And then, the next thing you know, you see her walking away with both wrists. He's on a plane and it's flying.
Yeah. But the part my daughter thought was absolutely fantastic was she didn't like Krenler, Ray Liotta, kind of from the start. She thought he was a jerk.
Yeah.
And she laughed out loud when Hannibal pointed out, well, this is the part of the brain that has to do with manners. So he won't need that very much, right? So he cuts it out and then cooks it. And Ray Liotta's like, or Paul Krenler, is like, wow, that smells good. Can I try it? So Hannibal feeds a part of his brain to him because it's the part that had to do with manners. And he didn't need it because he hadn't had it. So, and what'd you think of the bento box at the end?
Oh, and it's funny that Harris wrote it this way. And this little kid played it well, but of all the things to pick out of there, the figs, the caviar, of course, the kid picked the brains. Ugh, ugh. But as
Hey,
Hannibal says, it's important to try new things.
it's important to try it there. Like my kids, when they were littler, would eat anything, right? And now they're like, there's certain things they won't try because they're older and they're pickier. And they're like, and I'm like, have you ever tried it before? No, I just know I don't like it. I'm like, no, you don't. You have no idea if you like it or not. You just don't like the way it looks or whatever, right? So
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
now they're a lot pickier than once were. That being said, they still wanted me to take them to sushi like every 10 minutes. So, which I'm not going to do. By the way, anybody out there, if you ever watch this video, I don't want you to feel sorry for me for having kids. I love my kids to death. But when a 14-year-old boy and a boy who's about to turn 13 and an 11-year-old girl go, I'm hungry, take me to sushi, it's going to hurt. Okay. It was $225 last time or something.
Ouch.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it wasn't one of the expensive sushi places. It was just pricey, which is why every time they say sushi, I'm like, no, let's think Sonic, right? Let's not think sushi.
Right.
But anyway, back to Hannibal. So Aaron liked it. I don't know. Has your wife seen this one? Has she?
She has, and she's not big. She's really big on the suspense and crime dramas, but this one she didn't like because of the gore. Of course, she loved Silence of the Lambs. We're just getting ready to start the new True Detective, Jodie Foster. Um,
I gotta
so
watch.
she liked that suspense, but the gore turned her off. Me as a guy, I'm used to seeing that. Used to seeing that stuff. And while I'm not anti the gore, generally I do tend to like things a little bit more left up to the imagination myself as well, because I think it has a more of an impact. I mean, when you're reading it in the book, you're getting your imagination creating that scene. When you're seeing it on screen, unless it's conveyed well and acted well, and even if it's conveyed well and acted well, but isn't written well for the screen, then they can even the gore can have that initial shock on you, but then doesn't I don't know, it doesn't stick with you as long as if you had thought of it in your brain.
In most cases, I 100% agree with you. But when I read in the book, well, hey, he chopped this guy's head open and he's doing surgery and he takes out a part of his brain and eats it. That's one thing. When I watched him feed a portion of the brain,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sitting there like people who had Diane oddly had never seen it. She watched it and I watched it after I watched it with Aaron, and she's sitting there like, he's actually going to do it. I was like, yeah, he fed a part of his brain to the guy. There's just something about seeing that part on screen and just the way Ray Liotta played it, where he kind of turned up and goes, hey, that's really good. So, which, yeah, it was in the book and in your imagination, that's great. And I enjoyed it. But seeing that particular part on screen, I think took it to a whole new level.
I'll agree with you for that scene. I'll agree with you that it is a whole new level. Um, I guess I was thinking more of Potsy getting killed, like the whole thought of him disemboweled and whatnot. That when I read that, left a real big impression. And seeing it on screen, although it was gross and it was like, ugh, it didn't stick with me as much. Even the boards eating burgers didn't stick with. stuck with me more from the reading than it did in the movie. But yes, the brain feeding scene had more of an impact in viewing than reading.
Think about, and honestly, I think it's still one of the most amazing thriller or suspense movies ever. Jaws, right?
Oh yeah.
You see the shark for like 6 minutes of the whole movie. You see the aftermath of what the shark did several times, and it freaks you out more, I think, than seeing the shark. Because when you finally see the shark, you're like, "Great, kill it!" Right? Well, if you don't see it, and all of a sudden it's just this hidden thing that kills people, it freaks you out a lot more than actually seeing the shark itself. And I think the fact it was a little interesting in that movie, and we'll have to do a whole different video on that one, but because I've read the book too. But it was interesting the way they did it, because if you research the movie a little bit, they actually had to not show the shark very often because they didn't have the budget to keep showing the shark. So like, oh, let's work around it, and I think it turned out better.
Yeah, and the mechanics of it kept messing up on Spielberg and all that. There was just problematic. So yeah, we again separate video, but I'm familiar with the stories. Yeah.
And Spielberg wasn't Spielberg yet, right? So he couldn't just go back and go, yeah, I need another $20 million. Now he can go ask for whatever he wants. He doesn't care, right? But then it was like they weren't sure he was going to make it in the industry, really. I mean, he had some successes, but he wasn't the Spielberg of today. He could still be killed, right? Now he can't, but his career's too good. Anyway, I think this one, transition to screen was fantastic. I think it's got some things on the screen that might actually surpass the book. But this is one, if you haven't read it or watched it, do both. They're both fantastic options. And it's a 300-page book, 320. It's a fast read. It's not something that's going to take you a month to slog through like George R. R. Martin. It's pretty quick.
Yeah, I don't remember it being incredibly long when I read it, so I was able to get through it pretty easily. And I'm a reader. I'm not as avid a reader as you are, but I'm a reader. So for a light reader to get through without any complaints says something.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a weekend off and you just want to sit and read a book, it's one of those kind of weekend off sort of things you can crank through pretty fast. So. Yeah. Now that our local football team has decided to ditch the playoffs for some reason, but we have more time to read. But anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm not sure what movie we're going to do next, but I'll come up with something. So it'll be fun. Have a great weekend, everybody.